Talk Shoes.
Recorded live.
This is Rich Vernadeau, and this true story I'm going to be sharing here, the man who told it to me is going to remain anonymous. He was a Vietnam veteran, and this is a true event that occurred in his life. I had gone out with some friends and had quite a bit to drink. I'd been told over and over never to mix different types of alcoholic beverages, but true to my independent style, I downed a fifth of tequila in a 2-hour period, and then drank some beers and a little whiskey. We were having a role-playing game at my brother's apartment that night. But the more I had to drink, the faster everybody decided to get me to my apartment on the other side of the complex, upstairs. So my girlfriend, who was living with me at the time, and a couple of stout guys helped carry me up the stairs to my apartment. All of the liquor was taking effect by now, so my knees buckled under, and I fell flat on my face on the concrete terrace in front of my door. My buddies lifted me up while Parnita unlocked the door. Inside, I headed straight to my bed and crashed. I had a hell of a time getting to sleep, and there was something tugging at my mind, something I couldn't get a hold of. About 2 hours later, I woke up and was choking. I had puked all over myself, and now I was choking on my own vomit. I was nowhere near sober, but the phone next to my bed was ringing. I grabbed it, and that's when I first heard the news. My sister was dead. She had been killed in a bad accident, and the driver of the other car had hit and run. Sis was only 19, and I had just seen her a few days earlier. She was driving her new silver Trans Am, a brand new car she had gotten 2 months ago. She was engaged to be married. Now that was all over. The voice on the other end was an officer or some such, and he gave me brief details of the wreck. The car had been totaled, and my sister had been pulled out of the wreckage with severe injuries and massive bleeding. She arrived at the hospital, DOA. My first reaction, aside from shock and outrage, was to get up from the bed and go to the hospital and stay with her body as she was moved from there to the funeral home. But my body just didn't respond to my mind's orders. I couldn't move. I just couldn't get up from the bed. My girlfriend came in and told me I ought to just stay put because I was plastered and there was nothing I could do anyway. But I already knew there would be hell to pay for the guy in the other car once I got my hands on the son of a bitch. The cops beat me to it. The man was arrested about 2 hours later near Houston. The wreck had taken place in Austin. He was a black man, heavily inebriated, and he had a history of drunk driving. He was booked on several charges, among which was involuntary manslaughter, hit and run, and DWI. The following days were hell. The funeral of my sister, the grief, the whole thing was traumatic, and I was just obsessed with the loss of my sister. I assumed that justice was being done and that the man would go to the penitentiary. But when the big day in court came, I attended, and the man got a year's probation. I made up my mind it wasn't over. It wasn't going to end there. No man was going to kill my sister and just walk scot-free. No way. So I bought a high-powered rifle. I knew how to use the baby, too, after 3 years in Nam. And I began stalking the man. I ate, slept, and breathed the killer of my sister. I knew I was there. Everywhere he went, I was not far behind. I followed him to liquor stores. I stayed a few yards behind him in city parks. Any place he went, I went. One day I had the perfect chance, the ultimate opportunity, and every fiber in my body said go for it. I had the man in the sights of my telescopic lens, and my finger was itching to pull the trigger when I suddenly decided to let it go. I lowered the rifle, sighed, and knew that it would do no good for me to become a killer myself, that the taste of revenge was not worth the lifetime penalty I would probably pay for it. And at that point, I felt a spiritual relief a sense of satisfaction, a certain pleasure just in knowing that for a few seconds the killer's life was in my hands. I could have avenged my sister magnificently. I could have blown her killer away, yet I decided to let him go. I made the pivotal decision, the spiritually great choice. 4 years have passed. I've been through many jobs, many girls, and many apartments. I am now a computer student at a small college. From this experience, I've learned a great deal about life and death.
Big D. True Crime Story Dallas, Texas. Stabbing and homicide. The following incident took place in the late 1980s, probably about 1988. The events in this true crime account happened at a bar called the Mousetrap on Gilpin Avenue in far south Oak Cliff area of Dallas, near the Green Valley Raceway. The owner-bartender of the Mousetrap was a friendly, generous man who would often extend a patron who was down and out a free beer or let him run a tab. This small hole-in-the-wall bar was frequented by bikers, motorcycle gang members and other locals. Late one afternoon at about 6:30, a man named Ned was standing at the bar when a patron known by the street name of Crazy Bill slapped a $1 bill down on the counter for a beer. The friendly bartender owner was quite busy, and not paying close attention to the denomination of the bill and thinking it was a 20, he proceeded to hand Crazy Bill change back, amounting to $19. Ned, who was a friend of the bartender owner and did not want to see him ripped off, said to Crazy Bill, "Hey, that was a 1, don't do this guy like that." At this point Crazy Bill instantly reacted, pulling out a switchblade and slicing the air in front of him with it. A motorcycle gang member called JC grabbed Ned quickly and pulled him out of the way, telling him, "Run. Leave now. Go." Crazy Bill proceeded to begin slicing and stabbing the abdominal area of JC, the man who was now confronting him, slicing him open so severely that parts of his intestines were hanging out, and blood was everywhere. JC quickly got out of the bar and went to the portable stop sign there on the corner. This portable stop sign had a wheel for a base, a wheel which it was welded to. JC picked the sign up, took it quickly into the bar and whacked Crazy Bill in the head with it, crushing his skull and killing him instantly. Ambulance and police soon arrived at the scene, and transported JC to a nearby hospital, his intestines still hanging outside of his body. JC survived, and because his killing of Crazy Bill was obviously self-defense and there were plenty of witnesses in the bar to that effect, no charges were filed against him. This was a true crime incident in the late 1980s in Dallas, Texas. Unsolved Dallas murder from November 1997, from the Dallas Morning News. Man found dead in Oak Lawn apartment identified. A man found slain inside his Oak Lawn apartment was identified Sunday as Wayne Lee Wright, 47. Mr. Wright had been dead for at least a day when neighbors found him Saturday morning on the floor of his apartment in the Plantation House complex in the 2600 block of Hudnall Street. He had been shot in the head. Police were searching Sunday for Mr. Wright's missing car, a 1987 Plymouth Horizon with Illinois license tag KGH 444. Anyone with information about the car is asked to call Dallas Police at 214-670-1633. True crime story, Dallas, early 1970s. A man named Dean, now deceased, was a key figure in this true story. Dean was admittedly no angel and had a rough life that included military service and excursions into all walks of life, including occasional criminal activity. Dean was the pimp for a lovely, tall, svelte young woman with long black hair of American Indian descent. Picture in your mind a young Cher. Distinctive, unusual features that would not only attract the average guy, but a distinctive physical appearance that made this young lady remembered and easily identifiable. This attractive young lady would rent a cheap motel, go into a bar or club and lure a prospective John, bring the Mark back to the motel room and get him into bed with her. Dean would be secretly hiding in a nearby closet. During coitus while the Mark was on top of this young hooker, Dean would suddenly emerge from the shadows and whack the victim on the back of his head with a blackjack, rendering the victim unconscious. Dean and the young woman would then proceed to steal the victim's wallet, all of their cash and credit cards. Often these would be wealthy, prominent gentlemen and/or married men who for numerous reasons would not pursue making a police report. Dean had warned the girl, however, that there is always the danger of picking up the wrong one. Well, one afternoon Dean received a frantic call from the young woman, from a payphone in a small pool hall bar. She pleaded with Dean, "Get down here fast, I need help." Dean hurried to the location as fast as he could get there, speeding down the freeway to an exit which took him to the scene. When Dean entered he could find nobody in the bar, but he smelled gunpowder. He looked underneath one of the pool tables and saw a scene of utter carnage. The young woman began to crawl out from underneath, wounded and bleeding profusely, barely alive. She died in his arms before an ambulance arrived. The young woman had been shot by a shotgun blast. The crime remains unsolved, but Dean maintained that it was one of their victims that followed and tracked the girl down after having been robbed. They had finally targeted the wrong one, the one who was determined to get revenge for having been robbed. Rich Vernadeau.
Very intense show. We are going to be having a mystery woman. I will refer to her as Madam X. Our mystery woman is going to be called Marlena during the course of the show, and she wants to remain anonymous. She is a victim of severe abuse from a man with whom she became involved in a city in northeast Texas, and this situation has been going on now for some months. And I see that I've got the caller from Central Illinois on the line.
Hi, Rich.
Good evening, Terry. How are you tonight?
Fine.
How's everything in Illinois? How's the weather?
Oh, it was beautiful out today. It was really nice.
We're experiencing spring here, too. It's very, very nice.
Well, we're kind of in between temps right now. You know, it was up in the, I think about 53, 54, but it's with the sun out, it feels a lot warmer. But
Absolutely.
We're in that kind of the time of the season where it's going to be cold for a while, and then it's going to warm up, and it'll be back and forth. That's just Illinois weather.
Well, next week we're going to welcome Becky Buchko back, and she's going to have lots of interesting things to talk about. I'm looking forward to that. The week after that, Leilani Holland is going to be on, and she's written a couple of books, and she's going to be talking about all of that. Then on April the 30th, I'm going to be having an extra exciting show, too. And there's going to be a number of different guests coming on this month, so I'm looking forward to all of that. For anyone who doesn't know, all of my past shows are archived on www.talkshow.com, and you can go in there under Researcher 135's Community Call, and you can pull up any show from the past year and listen to it. They're all there. They can be downloaded. They can be shared. And I want to encourage anyone who wants to hear a past show to do that. So remember to tune in every week. I have a different guest and a different topic. Each week we'll cover relevant topics and issues, important things that are going on.
I remember Becky Buchko before. Now, refresh my memory on her. Was she the lady that was speaking about Johnstown? Or
Absolutely.
The flood?
Becky has devoted an incredible amount of time to the Johnstown flood of 1889, in which thousands of people were lost. That was a major American tragedy. The only loss of life that compares to it is Pearl Harbor, of course, and 9/11. The Johnstown flood is a major work that she has been pursuing, and she's done enormous research to try to identify a lot of the unidentified victims. She has a Facebook group devoted to the Johnstown flood. And as you know, Becky has written a number of ebooks as well that are available on Amazon, and one of them, of course, is Pandora's Box, which she was on the show a few months ago talking about. And I like Becky. Becky's been a repeat guest. I think Becky's been on about 4 times now. She has also introduced me to a number of other interesting people through Facebook and here on my show as well. Another repeat guest that I love, and she's going to be back in a few months, if not sooner, is Gwendolyn Rose. She's a fantastic lady.
I remember Gwendolyn.
She
does past life regressions, doesn't she?
Yes, she does, and she's terrific, very brilliant woman. And another woman who does past life regressions is Courtney Starkey, who operates some in Hawaii, and she's been my guest twice. And then she's also in Virginia, here in the States, in the continental U.S. She operates there as well. Another wonderful guest from the Seattle, Washington area was Darcy Parisso, who works a lot with animals. She's also a wonderful lady, and it was a pleasure having her on as a guest, and that was a terrific show.
Well, I know I was looking at one of your groups where you had discussed the bear attack at the is it the Laird Springs, the hot springs, and that's a very, very interesting story.
Right. It is, and that's a tragedy, and I'd like to talk about that a moment. That woman was from my neck of the woods, no pun intended, but she was not personally acquainted with her, and that was so unexpected and so also apparently random, and it makes you wonder about fate and destiny of the universe. And in fact, I mentioned that that particular show, as you'll recall, has also become the subject of a video that I've done, which is available on YouTube and on Vimeo, and you can look it up that way. In search, you Google Liard Hot Springs black bear attack. Now, black bears are not normally predatory, but in that particular area of Canada, the black bears tend to be much more predatory than the ones down here. It may be a genetic thing. They're not really sure. There were a lot of really strange and weird details with that, and that's a show that anyone who hasn't heard definitely wants to go back and hear. It aired in August, either August 15th or 22nd, if I'm not mistaken, of last year, and it's here in the archive at www.talkshoe.com. Researcher 135's community call. That's how you pull up the archive for my episodes.
Yeah, I
for all
saw the pictures on that. You had pointed that out to me, and I went in about a week or so ago and looked at the pictures, and it really, it's a beautiful area. The Hot Springs.
Oh yeah, the Hot Springs is a beautiful park.
Areas, and I couldn't really feature, why those people, were there. But then after seeing the pictures, it was a little more obvious that
a lot of tourists go from all over the United States go there. And
yeah, it looks like it's set right in the middle of the woods.
Absolutely. And again, listeners, Liard Hot Springs, you can Google that, and you can go to YouTube and see that, and you can listen to my show here. Well, Terry, it looks as if we have a guest on from Northeast Texas here. Good evening, Northeast Texas.
Good evening.
I understand you would like, during the course of this show, to remain anonymous.
Right.
And you'd like for me to refer to you as Marlena.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Tell me, Marlena, how and where did you meet the man who unfortunately victimized you, of whom you became a victim of abuse?
I actually had met a man that he knew at a transitional housing, so like a shelter. And he couldn't have gotten in, that particular man could not have gotten in if he had any kind of domestic violence on his record. So, of course, I think this man is okay. And after we both left there, I was eating somewhere, and it was a place that he frequented himself. And so I offered to take him, to and fro, because it was so hot that summer, which was just last summer. And when I went to go visit him one time, he knew of this. He knew I was looking for a roommate to help cut the cost on bills. And he introduced me to this other man, and that man was smoking meth. So I hadn't had experience with meth in 3.5 years, and it was just one time. And they passed the pipe, and I'm smoking it with him like 10 minutes after I met him. So I was on drugs when I made the decision that, yes, he could be my roommate. He had given me a false last name, which I wouldn't find out until he was living with me. And I had let a man in that I didn't know anything about, had never met before, and knew nothing about. And that was not a good idea.
And if I'm not mistaken, you later learned that he goes by about 3 different aliases.
Right. Morris, Maurice, and Lynn were the last names that he chose.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, at one point he actually held you hostage at a motel in a small northeastern Texas town.
It felt like being held hostage. He had talked me into going to this town literally days before Christmas, so the place was empty of any other guests. And I didn't think about that until really it was too late. And I can't, it's amazing that I can't remember everything that happened. I just remember being in several states of fear as I realized that he had changed into someone that I didn't know. And I because of the mess and because of the things that were happening around me and him appearing to change personalities. For instance, that town was basically deserted because it was the holidays, and we're driving through town. It's a small town, And there was a man sitting on a bench with a guitar.
If I recall, you telling me that he even yanked the phone out of the wall when you tried to dial 911.
Yes. I knew I'd hit a 9 and a 1, and I'd always heard that if you hit 9 and 1, they're coming out. It didn't happen. Nobody came out. The police did not come.
You did somehow successfully escape from there in your vehicle and got to a convenience store, as I recall, and a police officer arrived. Tell us a little about that. How did you make your escape?
We were supposed to be leaving anyway, but he was tied up on his phone. And I had already been put through quite a bit. Like I said, this man that was sitting in the center of town playing his guitar on a bench, and I had made mention of the man. Well, like the next day or so, he says, let's go on over and let's give that guy $1. Lo and behold, it's someone that he knows back in the day from Oklahoma. Well, what were the chances of that? So this man gets his wife, who wasn't there at that moment, to come to our hotel room and smoke meth with us. And it was strange. You know, they didn't have much money to put forth, you know, and then the man arrives the next day, early in the morning, saying that he was going to get $100 worth of meth, that he wanted to get $100 worth of meth. That was very strange.
Marlena, as I understand it, once you allowed this man to move into your house, then he would not leave, and you couldn't get rid of him, and he ended up with your keys and driver's license and all of that.
Yes, the night that I recall, he would never leave my side if he wasn't going to get meth, if meth was not involved. So I was sort of like a prisoner in my own home. And he had really boxed me in by trashing my bathroom. He'd managed to get the water turned off. I had given him the money to pay it, and he didn't pay it. So we were without water. And a bathroom can get pretty bad off when you don't have water.
I understand he would actually take your phone away from you and control your phone and delete your contacts from it, and that he took several phones away from you.
Yes, the first time my contacts disappeared, we were literally sitting in a Walmart parking lot, and we were talking. And for some reason, I checked my phone, and all my contacts were gone except his name, Billy Maurice, Billy Maurice, Billy Maurice, like 10, 11 times. And I took it to the phone company, which was Metro PCS. I don't mind giving them out because I had good service with them for 5.5 years, and now I'm having trouble. And none of the employees would really have anything to do with how this came about and how my contacts could possibly have gotten wiped out and his name put in so many multiple times. My phone would constantly delete contacts, including my children and my sister and anybody else that I knew. And he started fairly early in the relationship telling me he was going to kill me. He said he was going to kill me. He was going to kill anybody I tried to get with. So that makes you feel like to protect other people, you have to stay put, stay with this person. We take this saying for granted, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. I don't think people are masochistic and want to go through something like that. I think that it's a primal way of surviving.
I think if you recall, one of the things that you told me was that his threats included taking you out to the woods, tying you up with cable cord, and putting you in the trunk. Yes,
on 2 separate occasions. The first threat that he'd ever made to me was, I'm going to drive you out into the woods. He knew I was afraid of woods. He knew that I had a sister that was gang raped at a lake. I had talked so much when I first started doing the mess with him. I had told him way too much about myself. And that would become detrimental to me, and I didn't know. He used everything I said against me.
You had a beautiful, as I recall correctly, a Siberian Husky. He would let that dog out. What would happen with the dog?
Towards the end of the relationship, Yes, we had had problems with it. You know, Huskies are escape artists, and we had had trouble with the Humane Society. They'd actually let us just come and get the dog and not have to pay anything. And towards the end, he would open the door and let the dog out because I had gotten to where I would just jump up and just leave, which is probably why he wanted my car impounded. That was a way of controlling me. I see that now. I didn't see it then.
What exactly happened involving your car that you recall?
He would browbeat me until I just gave in and let him do the driving. He had had so many near accidents in my car, I can't believe I let it get that far. I mean, we're talking very frightening experiences. He always liked to go out of town to some neighboring small town. And we were driving along, and as fast as an accident can happen, sometimes you still will record some, in the fraction of a second, things that you see. He started veering off in the next lane, which was oncoming traffic. And one was a truck and one was a car. He started veering off in a dangerously close. I screamed. He righted my car, and then he went off again and almost hit the second car. What was incredible about this is that neither of those vehicles even tried to get off the road. They did not react at all. And I started
understand that. Sherry, did you have a question? Go ahead.
No, I just said that's scary, real scary.
It was very frightening, and I was already looped in to trying to protect everyone else, thinking I can't take this guy here, I can't take him there, he's jealous of everybody. I don't think he was jealous. I think he was just flat out controlling. I knew he wasn't in love with me. I told him he wasn't in love with me because I've had men love me, and I know how they act when they're in love, and he was not in love.
You studied psychology.
Nuts.
Yeah. Do you think, Marlena, that you could be a victim of Stockholm Syndrome when you look and analyze the psychological aspects of this?
Refresh my mind about the question.
Do you feel that you began to cooperate with your oppressor in the same way that Patty Hearst, when she was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army, you began to cooperate with the oppressor? He had things that you needed. How did he control you?
Well, he had made my home to where, the bathroom wasn't usable, even when the water got turned back on. He had managed to keep me in this one room. And all I could think is that the meth, by then I was somewhat psychologically dependent on the meth. Food, he could always get good food. Cigarettes, which I was already a smoker. And I cannot deny the sex and companionship. He was a very good lover to the point to where he could control me over the sex in a lot of ways. He did not, on the times that he raped me, sometimes it was consensual. And he would whisper things in my ear that disgusted me and made me angry. And then, of course, he would force me to continue.
You were raped multiple times, as I understand it.
Yes. I was raped quite a few times. On December 17th, this past December, he raped me 2 times in one day. He raped me in the morning and in the evening. And that evening was the time that he said that he would like to tie me up with cable and put me in the trunk of his car. It was not his car, it was my car.
Now, when you did successfully escape in your car in Clarksville, you somehow left the car there at a convenience store, but you made it to the hospital in another nearby city. And didn't you make a police report about the rape there in the emergency room?
Yes, I think I did. I was shaking. I was very upset. They said, "Do you want to talk to a police officer?" And I couldn't really look anybody in the eye. I was looking down at my hands, and I just shook my head slowly. And, of course, they sent a police officer in to talk to me anyway. Police officer And I couldn't really look anybody in the eye. I was looking down at my hands, and I just shook my head slowly. And, of course, they sent a police officer in to talk to me anyway. And it was, I'm telling the truth when I say, yes, he did rape me in the morning, and he acted more uncomfortable around me that day, and I was trying to pretend like everything was okay and that didn't happen. So I had said that I wanted to make love to him that night. I had to tell that police officer that if I was going to tell the truth about anything. And, of course, that's not what happened. I was willing, and he made sure that I wouldn't be willing. And so I ended up getting raped 2 times in one day.
Do you feel that the police and the Adult Protective Service and the system in general has failed you?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I draw an SSI check. I have been told that I'm disabled. Adult Protective Services says if you can cook for yourself and bathe, then I don't meet their criteria. To them, I'm not disabled. They're not even considering the psychological area of disability.
Marlena, I would like to welcome we have another caller here from Northeast Texas. Good evening, Northeast Texas.
Yeah, am I on?
Yes, hello.
Yeah, I had a little trouble. I lost the phone number, had a little trouble finding it.
Well, I'm glad you're here now. Welcome to the show, Henry. Marlena has come on. She wishes to remain anonymous. She is a mystery woman, a victim of severe abuse and multiple rapes. She shared a lot of that with us before you came on, but I think you got on here a moment ago enough to hear and know some of it. If you would like to ask a question of her, she's here tonight to answer questions or make comments, either one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to ask her what she thinks the rise in what she thinks is causing all these rapes and everything nowadays.
Rapes in general, or what my experience has been?
Domestic violence, rape, all
so
that
what do
stuff.
I think is causing any man to rape any woman?
No, why it's more of it nowadays than there used to be?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, I cannot answer that. I don't know why anyone does those kind of things, other than they have made a conscious decision to do it.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. They decided to do it. I don't think many of them just get a sudden urge to do it. I don't think so. Maybe so. I don't know.
Well,
it's only right, though. Go ahead.
I had met a man online that had rape fantasies, and he said that he himself said that it started out when he was a teenager, seeing it on TV, in different movies. He said it didn't matter that his mother was sitting beside him. He would become aroused. And he said that even though a woman might tease him unmercifully, he never acted on it. He would find girlfriends who had the same fantasy of being raped, and it would all be played out as real as possible, including him wearing a leather jacket and leather gloves and breaking in. So I really don't, I never could understand it, and of course that online relationship veered off because we were not on the same page. I didn't have rape fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it may be a cop-out and an excuse, but right before Ted Bundy was executed, he made his televised final statement, his last words, that the cause of his violence against women was looking at pornographic magazines. Now, obviously that was an excuse that Ted Bundy was using, but do you see the demeaning of women as a contributing factor to the nationwide epidemic of violence against women?
Women are a contributing factor? Is that what you're asking me?
Pornographic. Do you believe that the pornographic magazines are a contributing factor to male aggression toward women?
I think there's certain things that they encounter along the way, like in movies and things like that, seem to make it okay. Seem to make it as kind of part of life. And you'll get away with it more than you won't get away with it. But nothing denies the fact that they are still making a conscious decision to carry that out and bring it to life, real life. They want to control.
Henry, in your research, what have you discovered or uncovered about the epidemic of male aggression toward women?
Well, it seems to me like well, I've noticed that the more female contact a boy gets when he's growing up, the more likely he is to objectify women. More likely he is to have a lot of women, use women. But beyond that, I really don't know. So, in other words, it's an imbalance, a gender imbalance in the way people are raised. You can be raised with too many brothers or too many sisters or something like that. I know that people that are raised with like twins, for example, a male-female twin that are raised together, they don't have any trouble with rape or domestic violence or anything like that. They don't. I'm not saying they don't have trouble, but they don't have as much trouble because they grow up. They're used to dealing with the opposite sex, and they have a good relationship with the opposite sex.
That's very.
I think a lot of it has to do with how you're raised. I had a brother or have a brother, and of course I had a father too, and they were both and still, my father's passed now, but my brother is, and my dad too were both real respectful of women. They always were, and that's what my brother was taught from, our dad. So I think that's got a lot to do with it too.
Exactly.
They don't, see women as, sexual objects.
Yeah, we learn what we live.
Yeah.
Well, since I was a child, boys were my friends. I was the closest thing to being a tomboy without actually being one. I didn't like any of the rough stuff, but as far as looking for bugs under rocks and playing with worms and things like that, I liked that. Don't like bugs now, but I did then. And I noticed that he was very comfortable around women.
Elena, one of the ways in which he's controlled you, you had talked about he would take your clothes away from you so that you couldn't leave. You'd be nude. You wouldn't have access to your clothes.
That was the first thing he did. That was the first sign of abuse, is when he actually took my clothes away from me and told me I had to sleep naked. And sometimes in the mornings he would tell me I had to take my clothes off if I wanted to smoke any mess with him. And that didn't work. I was willing to not get high and keep my clothes. So he didn't do that to me more times.
Have you been able to get away from him totally, or have you had any further contact with him?
I haven't had any contact with him since March 16th, which was my birthday, and he had. The sad thing is, I woke up in a good mood, and was trying to maintain that, and being silly and laughing, and for whatever his reasons, he took a wet washcloth and popped me in the face. Well, it hit my eyeball, and it caused a headache that I would later go to the emergency room, and they would give me some ibuprofen. But he had also, before I left, he had threatened to. He held up a knife and said that he was going to slit my throat. And I haven't seen him since, because I got up, put my clothes on, and I just started walking.
And based on your experiences with him, you have no doubt that he is capable of cutting your throat.
Yes. Supposedly he'd killed a man in Oklahoma. The actual details I've never been told. But I do know he spent 8 years in prison in Oklahoma.
You mentioned that he had 3 previous wives. If I'm not mistaken, at least 2 of them died in somewhat questionable accidents.
He claimed to have been married 4 times. The first one he said he divorced because she wouldn't take care of the children. The other 3 died. 2 in car accidents and 1 cancer. I have met his mother, who died 2 months later. I have met his brother, who wouldn't look at me, his daughter, and his favorite niece. And I could have asked him questions, but he never left my side. See, I would have to ask them questions about him in front of him. And I didn't want to see that, because I didn't feel like I would ever get an honest answer anyway. His mother did tell me, control him, and smiled at me before she died. And I just smiled and nodded, thinking, there's no way I can control this guy.
I understand.
Sounds like you were lucky to get away from him.
I feel that I'm lucky to get away from him. It hasn't been
probably lucky
easy.
to be alive.
Absolutely.
Very possibly. There was 3 occasions, 3 nights in a row where I was certain that he had drugged me. The first time we had smoked meth, remember, methamphetamine, and I went unconscious while performing oral sex on him. And then I woke up, and I realized what was happening, and the next thing I know, it was a blackout again. And the very next day, I didn't know who he was that morning. I didn't know who he was. And I tried to play it off, asking him for a cigarette, trying to get my mind together, and of course, eventually it would dawn on me who he was. The next night, same thing happened. And on the third night, because the last thing I would remember is, hey, you want to drink the rest of this Smirnoff? And I'm not much of a drinker, but I did like the screwdriver Smirnoff. He never offered me his drink. He must have put something in him. And whether that was like my own Ativan, ma'am?
It could have been like Rohypnol, the date rape drug.
Someone suggested that to me, because it's out of your system in 6 hours. But the next morning, of course, I didn't remember him again. And the third night, I was drinking the Smirnoff, and I looked down, and I said, uh-oh, because I just realized he tricked me again. 3 nights in a row. That's kind of part of my disability, is that I can have blackouts, even if nobody's there to bother me. I can still sometimes not remember what happened the day before without any kind of drug or alcohol. That's just the way I am. I don't know why. But he's going against me.
Marlena, if I recall correctly, there was an incident where your dog suddenly collapsed on the floor, and you felt as if maybe he had also been drugging your dog, that beautiful Alaskan Husky.
I still feel that he was drugging her. When the rapes were occurring, where was my dog? We had had consensual sex, and dogs are going to get curious of what you're doing over there. Well, the rapes, my dog slept through. So I always felt he was 5 steps ahead of me no matter what. He seemed to know what I was going to do before I did it. And because of the meth, I really didn't know necessarily what was real and what wasn't, because meth can make you paranoid. Well, the situation I'd gotten into with him anyway would cause paranoia. And anyway, I didn't know who I could trust. I didn't know who I couldn't trust. I felt that I was dependent on this abuser. And then, of course, with all the bad times are all the good times, when he would be fun to be around. He seemed to have different personalities. I'd never seen anything like that before, the way he could just suddenly switch and become a frightened 14-year-old boy with freckles. And I asked him one time, did you have freckles when you were young? And he said yes. And, of course, I saw pictures where he did. He could look anywhere between 36 and 60-something. And he did. It wasn't wearing his hair differently or different clothes. It had nothing to do with that.
Do you believe that he is a sociopath? Do you believe that he has multiple personalities?
I'm not sure. I have to believe to some degree about multiple personalities because I know what I saw. And how he could act so young one time and then like an old man that was an old country guy that he knew I hated that guy. I mean, I would actually say to him, you know, don't start acting like that country guy. Don't start acting like that old country guy. I don't like him and you know it. So it seemed like he could control it to some degree, and he was just making these choices. There was 2 or 3 times that I saw him make a conscious decision to switch personalities because it would serve him better in whatever he wanted to do with me or to me. One of his personalities, and I only saw this guy like 2 or 3 times, and that's the guy I lived for. He was a really great guy. He was fun to be with. He was a very good lover. And, but I'd only seen that guy like maybe 3 times.
Marlena, what are some of the steps that you've taken to try to protect yourself?
Not going back to my own house. On the time
You're literally not living in your own house right now because of this guy.
Right. And I'm moving. I go to different houses, so he can't find out where I'm at. And from what I understand, he has called or texted a friend of mine saying, I know you know where she's at. You'd better tell me, or you're going to regret it. Things to that effect, which make you feel like, oh, I can't stay with that person because I've got to protect that person. This is my mess, and I can't drag anyone else into it. The cops were not helping. The police wouldn't help. I got court-ordered into a psych ward for being homicidal and suicidal. And one cop who had dealt with my situation with him more than once came to the emergency room and said, well, how can you want to kill him, but you want to kill yourself too? Well, I couldn't really answer that other than to say, you know, when you commit suicide, you're choosing the way you want to go. Having your throat cut with a serrated knife would not be one of those things. I wouldn't want to die that way. Because I'm
Sounds like that police officer had not had adequate training in dealing with people in a crisis, traumatized situation.
I would have to agree with that. When I did do the 15 days in the psych ward, I came back and all my furniture was gone. My stove to cook on, my microwave. I already didn't have a refrigerator that worked.
Did you make a police report about that?
No, I didn't, and I should have. I was so psychologically blindsided with that, and the cops had already not been helpful. One officer had told me that he owned half of that because he was living with me for 5 months at that point. And I said, you mean to tell me that all these things that my parents owned before they died and the things that I have bought myself before I even met him, that's community property? And he said, yes. Of course, that's not true. But
right, I think that policeman is an error.
Yes. It made me feel like that the police were not going to help me. And
how did you end up with a guy with a psycho like this?
I met him through someone else.
How old were you when you met him? Was it?
I was 48, and March 16th I turned 49.
It was like a blind date or what?
No, I made a decision after smoking meth with him and the guy that I did know, and that clouded my thinking, and it was also detrimental. I mean, you don't ever make a very heavy, important decision when you're high or anything, not even alcohol, nothing.
Were you married before?
I had been married 3 times.